Hi guys, I'm Katie, and we wanted to show you a cool feature of how you can invite your friends to watch online with you while you're watching the live stream. You can click on this plus button where it will pull up a list of your friends where you can invite them to join you in watching the live stream. You can do the same on your mobile device. So if you go to this share button here, you will be given a list of your friends where you can send them an invite to watch along with you while you're watching the live stream. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and we hope you stay connected with us, and make sure to like our Facebook page so that you can get all of the updates on what's happening here at Family Church. Hi guys, I'm Katie, and we at Family Church wanted to show you guys how to give on our live stream website. At live.ourfamily.church, you will see the option to give online on the right-hand side of your screen. You will be taken to a safe environment where you can see that your connection is secure. There are two options when you go to give. You can give one time or set up a reoccurring gift. So that's it, but we really want to know how we can support you and your family during this time. So please let us know, and we'll continue to be praying for you guys.
Church online community. We're so glad that you join us. We've got a really great show here today, so I think it's important that you look for that share button right now and share this on your Facebook stream. And so maybe someone else out there, a friend of yours, would have an opportunity to see this, and it could probably impact them, I think, greatly. As you're doing that and you're finding that share button, let me give you a few other announcements. First of all, check out our new small groups that we're offering this week. Our online small groups have been going so well. So many people are part of it, not only people within our church, but people in other states and other countries. So find a group and be a part of it with some great studies that are starting here very soon. Also tomorrow, our offices are going to be open here from 10 to 12 in the morning. We're going to encourage social distancing, of course. We'll have coffee, but it's an opportunity for you to come by and drop off your check, your tithe that you would have. And then also, if you have any items for our Dream Center, and the list of those items you can find online. We're giving out a lot of food. There are a lot of people in need. So if you can help us to supply us with any of those things, it would be appreciated. And you can drop those off on Wednesday from 10 to 12. Well, today we're going to look at what one of our purposes. It's Beyond. And Beyond, we define it as sharing your story. Now, we all have stories. If you're a follower of Christ, that means that Jesus did something in your life and that your story is yours. It's how God impacted you and got you to where you are today. So it's important for us to explore that. And I have 3 people here today that I think their stories are very powerful. The first one is Brenda Angstrom. And Brenda is married to Greg, and she's from Ohio and grew up also in Iowa, which I have a connection with. I was born in Ohio, Cleveland. And my mom was from Iowa, so I know both of those states very well. You worked with Cru, of course. Greg works with Cru. You're married to Greg. You work with Cru also, so that's appreciative of your service in that. And then you have 2 kids, and then 9 grandchildren, which I've just had my second, so I'm almost there. Got 7 more.
Yes.
But we're hopeful for that. You know, Brenda, you've been a part of this church for so long. We've known each other a long time, and but I know your story is very powerful. And it's probably something that people would expect when they see you. You're so grounded in the Lord now and everything, but things weren't always that way, were they?
Not at all. My childhood was full of insecurities, anxiety, fear, unforgiveness, mainly because my dad was very explosive in his temperament, and he would take things out on both myself, my 3 brothers, and my mom. And we never knew what was going to set him off or, when it was going to happen. We basically had to tiptoe all the time around him. But one of the things we did know about him was you never talked about church, you never talked about religion, you never talked about God in any way. And I think the most confusing part of that is that his dad, my grandfather, did go to church all the time,
Wow.
read his Bible all the time. Matter of fact, I was only 9 years old when my grandpa passed, and he actually died in his big, massive chair reading the Bible.
Wow.
So it never made sense to me at all.
It seems with that background that he had, that he would love the Lord, but he had some issue going
had
on
an
there.
issue.
And so that was probably keeping God out of your home. He was trying to keep God out of the home.
Exactly.
Was he successful at keeping God out of the home?
Well, for a while, but no, God has his way. And when I was 12 years old, around the age of 12, my dad had to leave town for a job. And I had an opportunity to finally accept an invitation to go to my friend's church with her. It was an evening service, and it was a singing group. And so this group presented the gospel, hearing the gospel for the first time.
Wow. And you're how old?
And I was around 12.
12.
Yes, yeah. And so at the end of the concert, we had an invitation to go forward. And I keep going.
Keep going.
So I went forward, and I was taken backstage. I remember it so clearly. I can actually smell the room, the steps. We sat on these steps, and they led me in a prayer of salvation. And I remember afterwards thinking, this is what my grandpa had. This is what he had. He had Jesus in his heart. Now, needless to say,
So the lights came on for him, is what you're saying.
for the lights came on. Exactly, the lights came on. But needless to say, Dad came home, and we were back to the same, no church, no talk, nothing. But it was around the age of 16 that we moved again. We moved many times. We moved again to a church across the street. My dad worked nights, and he got home at 5 in the morning on Sunday mornings, so he'd be sleeping. So the rebellious child in me would sneak out and go to church,
Oh, man.
to the services. So I began to hear for the first time a little bit of things about who Jesus wanted to be in my life, what he was really all about. But it wasn't until I was 18 and started dating this guy at high school who is now my husband. Friday
guy.
will be 44 years we've been
Wow, good for
married.
you.
But he'd pick me up and take me to his church. And that's when my discipleship really began. I got involved in a small group that at that time his brother was leading. And the first study I ever did in a small group was the book of John. The perfect book for those that are brand new Christians.
Yeah.
And
It's true.
so over the years, God taught me, he stripped away my insecurities over time, my anxieties, all my fears. And he began to teach me that I needed to forgive my dad, even though my dad hadn't changed at all.
Did he ever throughout your life?
He did. The wonderful thing is, I would just pour love on Dad whenever I was around him. And he didn't, you know, he received it, but he wouldn't hug back. Never heard I love you from him. No matter how many times I'd say it, he'd go, yeah. You know, but I didn't give up. And finally, on his 80th birthday, at 8 o'clock in the morning, he called me. And I remember going, Dad, I'm supposed to call you on your birthday, not you call me. And he goes, well, I want to tell you, you don't have to worry about me anymore. He said, I accepted Jesus. He said, I never forgot what my dad taught me. I mean, just amazing.
What got what got him to that point? Was he listening to something? Was someone talking to him? Or?
Well, one of the big keys is that my mom eventually had come to know the Lord too. And as much as he made life really horrible for her, she just poured back she did the same thing, really just showed him Jesus. No matter what the abuse was, she just kept showing him Jesus. Her and I would both leave materials around for him to pick up and find.
Right.
And I think the other part was that he was very close to one of his sisters. And she was a Christian, we eventually found out. And I think that she too, God just kept using people in his life. And three months after my dad accepted Christ, he passed away.
Oh, wow.
So,
and there was probably a part of you that the message of the gospel was so appealing because it was bringing God to you as a father. And it was a father that you needed at that time, at that early age.
yeah.
But God never forgot your own father and wanted to be a father to him too. And that the timing, you wonder why this timing, but you know what? It worked out.
Well, I'll be perfectly honest. There were times that Dad would be so bad for Mom that I would just wish him dead. I mean, I actually talked to my very oldest brother about that one time, just why can't he just die and just let her be happy? What a horrible thing to think. But boy, the conviction that came with that, saying, the Lord said, Brenda, he doesn't know me, and so.
I think there's got to be people out there watching that have abusive people in their own family, and we probably have wished the same things. But God's not really done with anyone,
No.
right, till the moment they pass.
Right.
And what a great story, not only about your own salvation, but also that even your dad in his 80s got to receive the Lord, and your mom too.
Yes.
It's a great story.
Yes.
Thank you. I
Yes.
appreciate
Yes.
you sharing that with us here too.
You're welcome. Thanks
today,
for having
Brenda.
me.
Well, next up we have George Hill. George is married to Sandra. They have 4 kids,
Steps.
and he served in the Army. And the other thing that I, of course, appreciate about George is that he is from Philadelphia, which I'm from also. We've had plenty of talks about Philly and the Eagles and South Street and the best cheesesteaks in town. And what was your vote for best cheesesteaks in town? Were you a Geno's guy?
Yes.
Oh, you're a Geno's
Yes.
guy, okay. But you also worked for SEPTA, which I heard all the time. I lived in the suburbs. I was north. But, SEPTA and the transit system and everything, and you were part of that, and you were a bus driver
Yes.
for them. And so one thing we love about George is that when we're back and we're up and running, he's one of the Windermere campus coffee makers and gets up bright and early, and we've always appreciated your service, not only in the military, but also here at church. And you were in my Tuesday night group, and I remember we were talking about stories, and you shared yours, and the whole group just sat there with their jaws hanging open about, what God did in your life to get your attention. And that's why I wanted you here today. I wanted to hear it. I know you've got some of it written down, but
Yes.
we would love to hear what
Yes,
your story.
I wrote it down so I don't have a senior moment. and lose my focus.
Okay.
But I've written down just some important points in my journey, my life before Christ. I grew up in a foster home at the age of 3. I was taken in by a Christian family, even though they had 9 kids of their own. My stepfather was a well-respected deacon, and my mother was a well-respected home missionary in the Baptist church. At an early age, I grew up hating the fact that I was in foster care, even though they treated me like one of their own. They were devout in their love for Jesus Christ and their love for the church. That was evident to me. I was always in church or some other religious activity. But at an early age, I rejected their God and hated going to church. I'm going to fast forward to manhood.
Now, what was that early age, would you say?
I'd say about 13.
About 13, so you
13 or
rejected-
14, I made a decision that
It wasn't for you.
I wanted nothing to do with this.
Nothing to do with it. Okay,
this
so we
Jesus.
fast forward. What do you call manhood? How old are you about this time?
I was about 17.
17, okay.
Yes, about 17, yes. Now, when I finished high school, I went into the Army to see the world and also to escape this Christian environment. In my own way, I just did not want to hear any more about this Jesus. This thing about being born again.
Yeah.
My stepmother would be playing pianos and talking about love of Jesus, and it would just eat at me. And
Do you know why?
I,
You know why it ate at you?
well, there's a hindsight. I look back. I think it was because I associated love with pain.
Oh,
Because I had scars of being abandoned and left with foster care. So I associate that with pain.
right.
And I think that spilled over
Okay.
when you talk about God loving someone.
Right.
I didn't want God loving me.
Thought you were unlovable?
I wanted to be my own person,
Okay.
and I wanted to handle my own life. And it didn't include Jesus and didn't include God.
I know that story. I do.
Yes. Well, about 2 years into my military service, I found myself being promoted to sergeant, and I ended up helping to lead men into combat in the jungles of Vietnam. My combat experience brought about changes in my life. I became cold and very angry inside. My stepmother, she used to write me letters, and it was just laced with scripture. And this, you need to be born again. I thought I'd run away from that over and over. And I got so angry that I stopped writing her from Vietnam. I didn't write any more letters to her. And God in his mercy allowed me to make it through the war, and I returned home. When I returned home, like many vets that came out of the Vietnam War, we were not the same. I was scarred and mentally damaged, mentally handicapped. I left the war, but the war up here in my head was still going on. It's called post-traumatic stress disorder.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm starting to tear a little bit, so be with
It's
me.
all right.
So my story goes on to the best part. February 1980, I was driving my vehicle and picking up passengers on a line that was about 30 minutes long from one end, 30 minutes long to the other end. And it was at 1:15 a.m. on Saturday morning. I was picking up all the people that were getting out of the clubs and out of the bars, and I was one of the last vehicles to come down, because after that, the system shut down.
Right.
So everybody was trying to either get in my car or the one behind me.
And they're all drunk and
They were,
riled up.
I would say they were noisy, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, very noisy. So it was kind of a full load. And the last 2 people to get on were interesting. They were young kids, I guess couldn't be no more than 17 or 18. And so the guy got on, and he gave me the biggest religious tract I'd ever seen in my life. So he says, here, I want you to read this. I snatched it out of his hand because I was mad anyway. And I told him, I said, look, I don't want to hear about what you have to say about your church or whatever this is. Go, please, and sit down. I thought he was going to sit up under me because of the type crowd I had in the back. But no, they went to the rear of the vehicle,
Wow.
sat down amongst all those guys. He went into his little pouch, pulled out a Bible, and started telling them about God. I fixed my mirror because I thought he was going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, they were calling him names and whatever, but he kept talking about God all the way to the end of the line. I was impressed with that. He got out. Everybody got out the rear doors at the end of the line. They stayed. Then they made their way up to where I was at the front doors. And I says to myself, well, here's another Christian I'm going to have to dust off. So he comes up and he says, sir, if you would read that pamphlet I have. So I always had a few things to throw at Christians that I knew they couldn't answer. So I threw one at him. I knew they were young. And of course, he couldn't answer. And so I roughly told him, I says, look, I know more about the Bible probably than you. Get off, go learn something, then you could come back and talk to me. Have a good night. And I slammed the doors.
This sounds like a Philadelphia bus driver if I ever heard one, yes.
So there's this pamphlet sitting up on the dash. Didn't have nothing else to read. I reached to get it, and there was a knock on my door. I opened the door. There was this kid again. So I asked him, I said, now what do you want now? He said, sir, I can't answer that question that you asked me. But as I study, one day I'll be able to do that. But I know what I can tell you right now. I said, what is that? Took his finger and pointed at me. Jesus loves you. Jesus died for you. Jesus wants to save you. Then his finger began to grow like Pinocchio's nose. And he said, and have a good night. I was left with my mouth open. I said, what? Couldn't say nothing. I slammed the door. There's the pamphlet sitting down there. Grabbed the pamphlet because then I noticed to read. But what impressed me was a picture. Sometimes the picture tells 1,000 words. Yeah. There was a lamb who had fallen over the side of a cliff. A briar bush, a small thin one, was the only thing holding him from death. But then there was this big hand reaching over the cliff, and that was the lamb's salvation. Oh. And I looked at that picture, and I started to cry. Because the lamb was me. And my imaginary picture, the hand was God trying to save me.
He didn't give up on you, did he?
No. Turned the lights out in my vehicle, went in the back, got on my knees, asked Jesus to come into my life. And I told him, I don't know all the words, but I want what those kids had. And there was just a great lifting, like somebody had lifted weights off my shoulders. I was crying, but I was happy, and I was joyful.
You could feel it right away, the change, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I drove about 8 blocks down, and the next passengers that got on, one of the guys had a Bible under his arm. And I asked him, could he stand up? I wanted to talk to him. Uh-huh. I told him what happened up there at the other end. And he said, you've been born again. Oh, there's that born again. So what God did was every night he would be at that corner and he would bring me some Bible lessons. And he made it a point to catch my car every night. And he was discipling me the whole
That kid did?
time.
The kid or that guy with the Bible?
The guy with the Bible.
The guy with the Bible did.
Yeah, he was going to work.
And he began to mentor you.
He began to mentor me every single night.
So as much as you tried to run, as much as you tried to reject, you couldn't hide in the jungles of Vietnam. you couldn't hide on a bus in South Philly or wherever you were at the time. God found you. And he didn't
Yes.
give up on you.
Yes. And I realized I put the whole thing together. The thing that I hated being a foster child, that was that hand of God, placing me in that environment because he had a purpose for me in life. Getting through Vietnam, it was that hand of God that kept me from coming back in a body bag.
Yeah.
And those two kids was the hand of God saving me for his purpose.
And it's sometimes the most unlikely people that God will send that'll help save you, to bring you
Yes.
the good news. You never would have expected two kids who think they know it all, right?
Right.
Ends up they knew something that you needed to hear at that time.
Yes.
That's a wonderful story. I feel like calling people forward now to accept Christ. It's a wonderful thing. Thanks for sharing that.
Okay, thank you.
And everything that you've done and you've helped us with and serving your country, and we see the grace of God all over that story. Thanks,
Okay.
George.
Thank you.
Well, next up we have Angela Dempsey. Angela has been a friend of mine for a long time, also much like Brenda. She also had some military experience, was an Air Force captain. She's married to John, has 4 kids, and she is an eye doctor.
I am.
So how's business been for you with everything that's going on here?
We've been closed other than emergencies
You've been
for
closed.
a month.
Oh no. Okay. So people have to do their best to find their way around here during this pandemic that we're dealing with.
Exactly.
And you're someone I just know so faithful to this church. Always sort of doing, if there's the hard thing to do, you and John raise your hand and say, we'll do it. You're helping out at the East Winter Garden campus, and you're there, and you're always a light everywhere you go. I know you always feel like there's a calling and a mission for you, but you haven't always been that way,
True.
right? God was working on you also, and you have a story I know many people will relate to.
Well, I was born into a Christian home, and my mom and dad taught Sunday school. My dad was a deacon, but when I was 4, they got divorced. We continued to go to church and to worship God, and at 9, I accepted Christ. And we went Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday nights, and then but I didn't read the Bible or do anything outside of church. I went to church and I did that, but that was kind of the extent of my youthful experience. And then when I was 16, I had sex for the first time, and I was so shamed by it, and I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody about it. And my hope had been to be a missionary, and I thought, I had enough knowledge of church and God that I thought, God's not going to accept this. I am no longer eligible for that. And so I really just fell away. I was like, I'm not going to talk to anybody about it. I'm just going to do my own thing, but I need a new plan. And a decade later, I married an atheist, and we made our plan to go after money and prestige, and that crumbled, not surprisingly, into a mess. And at 33, I was divorced with 2 little kids and had to reboot my life. And I came and I sat in the back row of this church, and I would cry and I would pray that no one would talk to me, because I did not want anybody to know what a shambles my life was in. And I ended up joining the church so that my daughter, who was 2 at the time, could go to Mom's Day Out. And I went to the New Believers class with Debbie McCann, and we went through the Old Testament survey and the New Testament survey, and each week I would sit with this group of new believers and listen to the Bible and how God was working in their lives. And then the third section that we went through was financial peace. I had another name at the time. But I remember sitting there, and money was very tight, and I had a spreadsheet, and we could eat out once a week, and everybody had to drink water. And I remember thinking, in Malachi, God said, test me with this.
Testy, yeah.
And I said, I'm going to test you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to believe you are who you say you are and that you're going to do what you tell me.
Uh-oh.
But you better come through. Like, you better show up because there is no plan B on this. And he showed up faithfully, week after week, month after month, year after
How?
year, in providing for us, in peace, and it's amazing how he would just gently teach me through struggles at work or in health problems, or I remarried and struggles in my marriage. And each time I would say, what do you have to say about it? I'm going to do everything you say. I'm going to read your word. I'm going to find out what you have to say, and I'm going to do what you say, and I'm going to see what happens.
Yeah.
And he has been so faithful, and he's so gentle, and just, okay, you're going to learn this lesson, and then I will move you to the next thing. But the beauty of the life that he has provided and the willingness that he would let me, I was a thief, a liar, a fornicator, an adulterer, and he said, I want you. I love you. I want you. You are valuable to me. And that he would let me serve him is just overwhelming. And he said, you're not disqualified because my righteousness I give to you. And so you are a new creation, and I have a plan for you and a purpose for you. And it was never erased by my sin.
So all this shame, right? Because shame seems to be the theme at the beginning.
Right.
The shame just stuck with you
Yes.
all throughout and didn't let it go. Who did you feel you let down? Was it God that you had
God
let
for
down?
sure.
Right.
For sure. And myself and my mom, like everybody, that I had just disappointed everybody.
So you carried all of this with you for so long. So the moment that shame sort of released was the moment you realized what? Say that once again.
That I'm a new creation,
New
that
creation.
God had a purpose, and he says, I make you new, and that the shame was not who I was. I am a child of God, that he determines who I am, and not my sin, that was erased on the cross, that he had paid for it, and I am who he says I am.
So that's a great point, because you have been talking to yourself, or Satan had been talking to you, telling you who you thought you were,
Right.
or who Satan thinks you were. Certainly he's not going to use you. Certainly you're no good. And I mean, I know I listen to that voice too, but I got to hear the truth.
Yeah.
The truth is that God loves you. The truth is that he died for you. You know, that's the truth that, the other people that were on here came to realize. And what a relief in your life to release you to do all the things that you've been doing for the Lord. And here and at work and so many other places. Can you imagine what your life had been like if you still were under that burden of all that shame?
I, at 16, considered committing suicide. And I sat in the bathroom with a mixed up cocktail, and that was my plan, because I thought, my life is over. Like, there is no hope from here. And I truly think that I would have ended up in a very dark place, but for Jesus.
Yes, but for Jesus. Well, I know that story resonates with so many people that are watching that have sort of gotten into that place that God can never use me because I did this. But I always look at David, right? A murderer. And sometimes I go, well, at least I haven't murdered somebody, but an adulterer, right? And then you look at Solomon, and you look at Moses, right? And you look at all these people and the apostles.
Right.
Nobody was perfect, and God, it wasn't until they allowed Jesus to work in their lives, to show them what it means to be a new creation, could they ever do anything. Could they ever go and serve him. And your story is certainly another one in the great line of stories of God redeeming people who didn't think they were worthy.
Amen.
It's amazing to think that you were ever at that point because of the confidence that you just have in your own life right now. To ever think that you thought that you were never worth anything, that's really a testimony to what Jesus has done.
It is definitely the power of Jesus, for sure.
I appreciate you telling us that. Thank you, Angela. For those of you that are listening, all three of these stories talk about different things, with their families, what they were going through, rejection, constantly being in that place, either whether it's through anger or just through shame, whatever it is, we all reject the Lord in different ways. But he wants you. He wants to come into your life and show you what your life can be when he's a part of it. So whatever it is that's holding you back, I hope these stories have shown you this. Don't let it hold you back any longer. Release yourself to the truth that God loves you and surrender your life to him so that he can do an amazing work in you. I hope you do that. Let the people know in the chats that are going on right now that you need some help in this, you want someone to talk to, and they'd be happy to get in touch with you. There's a few other things as we go. First of all, tomorrow night, Student Ministry is on Zoom. Check them out. They're going through a great study right now, what it means to be the church. Make sure your students are a part of that. Also tomorrow night, Wednesday, our communion night. Great worship, great message from Chuck. Come and be a part of that. And thanks for being here. Have a good night. Bye-bye.